You're listening to Whispers of Asia, where forgotten spirits stir and ancient rituals breathe through crumbling temples and misplaced jungles. These are the stories passed from trembling lips to curious ears, tales never written, only whispered in the dark. Tonight, we journey deep into the northern hills of Thailand, where faith rotted in silence and the body of a revered monk lies untouched, unburned, sealed in glass. The villagers believed he had reached enlightenment, but what they preserved was not peace. This is the story of the monk who was never buried and the forest that still prays in his name. The train from Bangkok slowed as it entered the northern hills, its horn echoing through a haze of morning fog that clung to the jungle like a ghost that refused to leave. Anya sat by the window, her fingers pressed lightly against the glass, watching as the world shifted from the city's concrete pulse to the stillness of forgotten countryside. Rice fields glistened like mirrors. Palm fronds swayed with the weight of unseen eyes. Somewhere out there, she told herself, hidden beneath the folds of mist and memory, lay Ban Pon Pheo, the village her professor had called a living museum of dying rituals. She came to record what time had almost erased, the vanishing Buddhist funerary rites of northern Thailand, where monks once walked barefoot into the jungle to die in silence, believing their decay was an offering to the earth. It was an academic project, a study. At least, that was how she justified it. But beneath that curiosity, she carried another, unspoken hunger. A need to understand the place where her mother had been born and fled from decades ago, never speaking of it again. When the train stopped at a small wooden platform, Anya stepped out into air thick with incense and the faint odor of damp soil. A single pickup truck waited, its driver holding a sign with her name written in clumsy English. The man was in his 30s, wearing a faded orange shirt. He smiled without showing his teeth. "You are Miss Anya from Bangkok University?" he asked softly. I nodded, adjusting the strap of her camera bag. "I am Tum. The headman said to bring you to guest house. You stay there. But," he paused, his voice fading like a wick burning out, "don't go into the forest after dark. The temple there, it prays by itself." Anya frowned. "It prays by itself?" He didn't answer. He only turned toward the truck, and she followed, her boots crunching against gravel. The road wound endlessly through hills glazed in mist. Shrines appeared along the roadside, tiny wooden houses with garlands of marigolds and plastic bottles of red soda. Tum honked softly at each one, as though greeting old friends. Anya watched him, studying the rhythm of his gestures. He was careful, reverent, as if the forest were listening. They arrived just before sunset. Ban Pon Pheo was smaller than she expected, a scatter of wooden houses on stilts, roofs made of rusted tin, dogs sleeping in the dust. In the distance, bamboo trees bowed like old monks. A faint chanting drifted through the air, deep, rhythmic, almost human, but it came from the direction of the forest, not the temple bell. Inside the guest house, an old woman served her rice and boiled vegetables without a word. Her wrists were covered in white strings, the kind tied during blessing ceremonies. When Anya thanked her in Thai, the woman's eyes flicked up sharply. "Don't say thank you after sunset. It invites something that listens." That night, the rain began. It came softly at first, tapping against the bamboo walls, then harder, like fists on a coffin lid.
Anya sat by the window, notebook open, listening to the forest breathe. She could hear the frogs, the insects, the steady sigh of wind through the banana leaves. And beneath it all, something else, an almost rhythmic murmur, low and endless, as if hundreds of voices were chanting beneath the soil. She told herself it was water, the sound of rain rushing through gullies. But when she turned on her recorder, the playback revealed something stranger. Faint syllables, spoken in Pali, the sacred language of old Buddhist texts. Words she couldn't recognize, yet felt she had heard before, in dreams perhaps, or in the spaces between heartbeat and silence. The next morning, Tomb waited for her by the gate. He looked tired, eyes ringed in shadow. "You heard it?" "What?" "The forest praying." He gestured toward the line of trees beyond the paddy fields. "It starts when someone new comes. The spirits there, they know when a stranger arrives." Anya tried to laugh it off. "You mean the temple?" He shook his head. "No monk has lived there for 30 years, but still, the chanting comes." They began walking toward the village center, where an ancient banyan tree stood wrapped in white cloth and offerings of betel leaves and candles. Children played nearby, but each time the wind blew, they fell silent and stared toward the forest. An old woman sitting near the tree called out to Anya, "You are the one who wants to write about death. Then you must see where death refused to die." The old woman told her of Wat Tham Rung, the temple that lay a few kilometers inside the jungle. It had once been a place of meditation, where forest monks sought enlightenment through isolation. But after one monk, Luang Pi Tham, died there during deep meditation, no one dared enter again. The villagers believed he had not truly died. His body, they said, was still intact, eyes closed, skin unbroken, resting in a glass coffin. They had offered incense for years, until the offerings began to return. Sticks that had burned to ash reappeared whole by morning. It was said that the monk had begun to breathe again, slowly, softly, only when no one was watching. Anya's pen trembled slightly as she wrote. "Where is this temple?" The woman pointed toward the forest, where fog crawled like smoke between the trees. "But don't go," she warned. "Every time someone enters, something follows them out." That night, Anya dreamed of the forest. She stood before a glass coffin beneath a canopy of dripping leaves. Inside, a monk sat cross-legged, face serene, his skin the color of old wax. A single thread of white string coiled around his wrists, disappearing into the darkness beneath him. When she opened her eyes, she was still in bed, but the air was thick with the scent of burning incense. Outside, the village dogs barked madly. Somewhere in the distance, a bell rang once, long and hollow. Anya rose, heart hammering, and went to the window. The forest was still, drowned in fog, yet she could swear she saw it, faint, flickering like the breath of a candle, a shadow moving through the trees, draped in saffron robes. And then she heard it again. The forest was praying.
The path to Wat Tham Rung was little more than a suggestion carved through the jungle, overgrown, slick with moss, and shrouded in mist thick enough to blur the line between dream and waking. Tomb hesitated at the tree line, fingers twitching at the edge of his pocket where he kept a talisman made of bone and thread. "You shouldn't go," he muttered, eyes lowered. "The monk does not like to be looked at." Anya adjusted her camera bag and stepped forward anyway. The forest swallowed the sound of her boots, the crunch of twigs muffled beneath rotting leaves. A light drizzle began to fall, turning the air into breath, warm, wet, and strangely sweet.
The jungle smelled of decay and wild ginger, of old temples and older ghosts. Tomb followed reluctantly, whispering under his breath in Thai, each phrase ending in a trembling chant. His footsteps barely disturbed the soil. They crossed an old bridge made of warped planks and rusted railings. Beneath it, a creek gurgled, though there had been no rain for days. The water was black, reflecting nothing. A lone frog croaked once, and then fell silent. The first sign of the temple was a stone bell, half buried in vines, cracked down its center like a broken vow. Next came the decaying gate, its arch collapsed, the wooden frame hanging like a jaw torn open. And then, rising out of the undergrowth, like the rib cage of some long-dead beast, Wat Tham Rung. It was quiet, not the peace of prayer, but the silence that follows screaming. The outer walls had surrendered to time. Moss crawled along carvings of lotus petals and demons. Statues of monks stood armless and eyeless, their faces weathered into expressions of warning. Anya stepped over fallen beams and ducked beneath a hanging lantern crusted with insects. The main prayer hall still stood, its doors splintered but ajar. She pushed them open. The smell hit her first, sweet, heavy, unnatural, like honey left too long in the sun. Then came the cold, not the chill of air, but the cold of stone, of places untouched by light. And there she was. At the center of the room, on a raised platform lined with cracked tiles, stood a glass coffin. It was old but intact, framed in dark teakwood carved with floral patterns and Sanskrit prayers. The glass itself was clouded in places, as though fog had settled inside, but she could still see him, the monk, Luang Pi Tam. He sat cross-legged, robed in faded orange, hands resting gently in his lap. His face was pale, skin tight like lacquered wood, lips sealed in eternal meditation. His eyes were closed, but not peacefully. They were pressed shut too tightly, as if something inside fought to open them. His skin had not decayed, not rotted, not crumbled. It had paused, preserved by air or faith or something far less holy. A single strip of parchment clung to his forehead, etched in red ink, faded but legible. Anya leaned in to photograph it. As her camera lens clicked, the fog inside the coffin shifted, like breath meeting cold glass. She stepped back. "Do you see that?" she whispered. Tomb had not entered the room. He stood at the doorway trembling, whispering fiercely now. "He's awake. He knows you're here." Anya turned back. The monk had not moved, and yet something had changed. The parchment was peeling slowly away from his skin. Her camera began to glitch. The screen flickered. The battery, fully charged just minutes ago, blinked red. When she looked through the viewfinder, it refused to focus on the monk's face. Each time she tried, the lens shifted, blurring only his eyes. She took a step closer, held her breath, raised the camera again. Click. This time, the flash fired without her pressing it. The room lit up in a burst of white. In that instant, brief, electric, she saw it. The monk's hand. It had moved. Only slightly, but enough. One finger now pressed gently against the glass, as if trying to trace the outline of her face. The camera dropped. Tomb shouted something, and the doors slammed shut behind her. Darkness. No sound. No breath. Then, tap, 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 from inside the coffin. Anya stood frozen, her voice lost, her thoughts spiraling into the fog that now filled the hall like rising smoke. Then, the coffin released a hiss, a soft exhale. The fog rolled across the tiles, curling at her feet. The monk's eyes, still closed, seemed to twitch beneath the lids. His lips, sealed moments ago, now parted just slightly, and from that small opening, a sliver of smoke escaped, carrying with it the faint scent of sandalwood and rot. She ran, burst through the doors, into the jungle. Tomb was already gone. Branches clawed at her skin, roots pulled at her ankles. The fog chased her, slow and deliberate, like it had no need to hurry. When she reached the bridge, she collapsed, gasping. Behind her, the temple stood still. But now, the bell was ringing, slowly, deliberately. No wind, no hands, just the sound of something old, remembering how to speak.
The village woke to the sound of silence. No roosters crowed, no bells rang. Even the dogs refused to bark. When Anya returned, soaked to the bone and trembling, she found the villagers gathered in the square, their faces tight with fear. No one asked where she had been. They already knew. Tomb was gone. His truck sat abandoned near the bridge, door open, engine dead. The tracks on the muddy road led into the jungle, but none led out. Anya stood in the doorway of the guest house, clutching her camera like a relic. The old woman who owned the place stepped forward and gently took it from her hands. She didn't ask permission. She opened the small flap and pulled out the memory card, murmuring something under her breath, then placed it inside a clay jar filled with rice. "Rice eats what you shouldn't remember," she whispered. Anya didn't argue. She was too shaken to speak. Her mind replayed the image again and again. The monk's hand on the glass, the fog exhaling from his lips, the sound of tapping that seemed to echo not in her ears, but inside her skull. That night, she couldn't sleep. The forest outside hummed with life, yet the sound carried no comfort. Crickets chirped in broken rhythm. The frogs croaked only once, as if afraid to be heard. Somewhere, a bell rang 3 times, low, distant, wrong. She lay awake until dawn, and when the first light bled through the cracks in the bamboo wall, she decided to seek answers. The villagers avoided her eyes as she passed. Even the children who had smiled the day before now hid behind their mother's skirts. The same old man who had spoken near the banyan tree sat by the roadside, staring at a bowl of untouched rice. She knelt beside him. "Grandfather," she said gently, "who was Luang Pi Tham?" His lips tightened. "You saw him." "Yes, but I don't understand what I saw." He nodded slowly, like someone remembering a wound. "You came to study death, but that monk, he never died." Anya frowned. "You mean his body was preserved?" "No," the man said. "I mean he refused to leave." He told her the story in a voice cracked by age and smoke. Long ago, when Ban Pan Prao was still young, the forest was a place of both refuge and punishment. Monks came to seek silence, to starve their desires, to listen to the whisper of God in the rustle of bamboo. Luang Pi Tham was the youngest of them, devoted and gentle, but obsessed with purity. He believed the forest was holy only because it hid what men feared to see, the spirits of those who had died unblessed, Pi Tai Hong, the restless ones. He went deeper than any monk had ever before, fasting until his body became hollow and his thoughts turned to smoke. They said he began hearing a voice, soft, childlike, calling from the roots of the fig trees. The voice promised him enlightenment beyond suffering,
but only if he accepted what others rejected. So, he invited the spirit to share his body. The old man's hand trembled as he pointed toward the forest. When the other monks found him, he was sitting just as you saw him now, cross-legged, eyes closed, but his lips were whispering prayers backwards. The air was thick with blood and the scent of burning wax. The abbot tried to exorcise him. They bound his wrists with sacred string, carved the sealing mantra into his flesh, and placed him in the glass coffin to contain what he had become. Anya felt the chill crawl up her spine. So he wasn't enlightened. The old man's eyes glistened. He was enlightened by something that never belonged to heaven. He lifted his sleeve, revealing a line of faded scars, thin white marks wrapping around his wrist. "I was one of them," he said. "I helped tie the strings." "Why?" "Because he begged us to," he whispered. "He said, 'If you don't bind me, I'll walk again.'" Anya wrote everything down, her pen shaking. "What happened to the strings?" "They were renewed every year until the abbot died. After that, no one dared to touch the coffin again." The old man leaned closer, his breath smelling faintly of incense. "But I've seen the strings in my dreams, snapping one by one like hair burning in fire. The last time I saw him smile." As Anya left, she felt the weight of his words sink deep into her chest. The forest loomed on the horizon, green and endless, but now it felt alive in a way that made her skin prickle. She returned to her room and retrieved the camera the old woman had hidden. The memory card was gone, but she still had the internal storage. One photo remained, the last she took inside the temple. She opened it on her laptop. At first glance, it was the same as before: the coffin, the monk, and the mist. But as she zoomed in, she noticed something strange. In the reflection of the glass, standing beside her, was another figure. A man. Shaved head, hands folded, eyes open, his lips parted in a faint smile. Her heart thudded. She looked around the room. Empty. The window curtains swayed with the wind. The air smelled faintly of sandalwood. She turned back to the screen, and the photograph flickered. Just for a second, the monk's eyes opened. Then the image went black. That night, as the moon rose over the rice paddies, a faint chanting began again from the forest. The same cadence she had heard before, but this time she could make out the words. It was her own name, whispered again and again like a prayer. Anya, Anya. She pressed her palms to her ears, trembling, but the sound wasn't outside. It was coming from her chest, from the place where breath meets soul, and the voice that spoke it was not hers. At sunrise, Anya stood alone at the edge of the jungle, clutching a bundle of incense sticks, jasmine petals, and folded gold leaf squares, a standard offering in Thai Buddhist ritual. Her breath misted in the cool morning air as she stared down the narrow path that led to Wat Tham Rung. The chanting had stopped just before dawn. She had not slept. Instead, she had sat cross-legged on the floor of her room, trembling beneath the weight of a silence that felt not empty, but waiting. She needed proof, not for her thesis anymore, for herself, for her sanity. She lit the incense, pressed her palms together, and whispered a prayer. Her voice was hoarse, dry. The words felt strange in her mouth, like reciting a language she'd forgotten long ago. Wat Tham was still missing. The villagers now whispered his name like a curse. Some said they had seen a monk in orange robes walking through the rice fields before dawn. Others claimed the forest had swallowed him whole. No one offered to come with her, so she returned alone. The path was quieter than before. The jungle seemed to hold its breath as she passed. No birds, no wind, only the sound of her steps and something else beneath it. A faint rustle, like robes brushing leaves. The temple greeted her with that same dead stillness. The wooden beams groaned under the weight of time. Inside the prayer hall, the glass coffin waited. The monk had not moved, at least, not visibly. Anya stepped forward and placed the offerings gently at the base of the coffin. The incense smoke rose in a lazy spiral. She bowed 3 times, forehead touching the dusty tiles. Then she turned and left. She did not look back. That night, as rain slicked the rooftops and thunder rolled like a drumbeat from the hills, Anya awoke to a smell she instantly recognized. Jasmine. Sweet, strong, cloying. She sat up. Her heart raced. The window was open. On the floor beside her bed lay the incense sticks, unburned, still bound with the red string she had tied that morning. The petals she had offered now sat in a perfect circle beneath the wooden table, as if placed there by unseen hands. And the gold leaf squares? They were pressed to her mirror, forming the shape of a face with eyes closed and lips parted. Anya staggered back. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. The air in the room had turned heavy, thick like syrup. She could feel it clinging to her skin. She grabbed the incense and ran outside, barefoot, the wet earth sucking at her steps. The villagers were still asleep, or pretending to be. No lights flicked on, no curtains stirred. She reached the banyan tree, fell to her knees, lit the incense again with shaking hands, but it wouldn't catch. The match burned to her fingers. The flame refused to touch the wood. She struck another and another. Still the incense would not burn. "Please," she whispered, "I didn't mean to offend." Behind her, she heard footsteps, soft, bare. She spun around. No one, just the wind moving through the tall grass. But she knew something had followed her back, and it was returning what she had given. By morning, the village was in mourning. A man had been found at the edge of the jungle, his hands pressed together in prayer, his body bent forward in a full prostration. His eyes were gone. Not gouged, not torn, simply missing. The skin where they had once existed was smooth, seamless, like they had never existed. The villagers refused to move the body. The headman burned the corpse where it lay, pouring coconut oil over it and reciting chants Anya didn't recognize. When she asked who the man had been, no one answered. Just a name, another one to forget. Back at the guest house, the old woman pulled Anya aside. Her hands were cold, her grip iron tight. "She don't offer to what's already full. The monk isn't hungry. He's not seeking merit. He's giving it back." Anya stared at her. But why? Because the dead don't want worship. They want silence. You disturbed his sleep. Now he's disturbing yours. That night, Anya dreamed she was walking through the temple again, but it was whole this time, lit with candlelight, chanting filled the air, thick and urgent. She approached the coffin. Inside, the monk's eyes were open, wide, unblinking, staring directly at her. She stepped closer, unable to stop herself. The glass began to fog from within, his breath pressed against it, slow, measured. Then he raised a hand, tapping the glass once, twice, 3 times. Each tap echoed in her chest like a heartbeat. She awoke, gasping. The smell of jasmine filled the room again. This time, the gold leaf face on the mirror was smiling. The drawings began to appear the next morning, quietly, without warning. First, on the fence behind the spirit house, where someone had sketched a circle in charcoal, a perfect ring, shaded lightly. Then another, and another, each one nearly identical, yet subtly wrong, off-center, tilted, as if trying to mimic something the artist had only seen in dreams. By noon, they had spread, on the walls of the community hall, on the ground beside the well, on banana leaves hanging limp in the sun. Eyes, dozens of them, hundreds, staring blankly in every direction. Some were small and childlike. Others were wide and crude, scrawled in haste with ash, with soil, even with blood. Anya followed the trail until it led her to the boy. He sat behind the headman's house, knees to chest, a dull knife in one hand and a scrap of wood in the other. He was carving, slow and steady, tongue pressed to the corner of his mouth. He didn't look up when she approached. "Hello," she said, gently. No response. She knelt beside him, careful not to startle him. His face was smeared with dirt. A soft, glazed look clouded his eyes. Not quite blank, not quite aware. "What's your name?" Still nothing. But his hand never stopped moving. The knife traced arcs, circles, slits. When he flipped the wooden scrap around, Anya's breath caught. Another eye. Not drawn this time, carved. Deep, uneven lines gouged into the wood with the care of someone creating an offering or a warning. The boy's grandmother appeared then, thin, barefoot, her gray hair tied back with red thread. Her face was taut with exhaustion. "Don't speak to him," she said, her voice brittle. "He doesn't talk anymore." "What happened to him?" She hesitated, then sat on the worn step of the porch, hands folded like someone about to pray or confess. 2 nights ago, he started mumbling in his sleep, words I hadn't heard since I was a girl, old Pali. Not even the monks speak it now. He'd never heard it before, but he knew it, every syllable. Anya's stomach turned. He drew eyes on the walls of his room, with his fingers, no ink, just something black. It smelled like iron and rot. I scrubbed them off. They came back. The boy suddenly stood, his gaze fixed in the distance. He began walking toward the edge of the rice field, where the jungle began. "Where is he going?" Anya asked. The grandmother's voice dropped to a whisper. "He says the monk talks to him at night, through the wall, tells him to come watch." "Watch what?" "The eyes of those who forget." They followed him from a distance, staying close, but not touching. The boy stopped by the roots of an old Bodhi tree. He began to dig, bare-handed, with urgency, as if trying to reach something buried just beneath the surface. Anya stepped closer. Inside the shallow hole, barely covered in dirt, lay another carving. A face, a small wooden mask. Its features were crude but unmistakable. eyes open wide, mouth stitched shut with twine. The grandmother gasped and grabbed the boy, pulling him back. "This is not his," she hissed. "He has never seen this before." The mask began to rot as they watched. The wood pulsed, darkened, sagged inward. In seconds, it was mulch. The boy turned to Anya. His voice came low, hoarse, and completely unnatural. "He's inside the forest now." Anya froze. "Who?" "The monk. But not just him. They all have eyes, you see, even if they left their bodies behind." The boy blinked slowly, then turned and walked back to the house, dragging his fingers along the bark of trees as he passed. Wherever his hands touched, small eye symbols bloomed like mold. That night, the village fell into a hush deeper than silence. Candles refused to stay lit. The dogs whimpered and hid beneath the houses. Anya lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She didn't dream. She watched. She listened. And at exactly 3:07 a.m., a child's voice whispered from beneath her bed. "Do you want to see what he sees?" She didn't scream. She didn't move. She only closed her eyes. But even in the dark, she saw them. Eyes. Blinking. Watching. Endless.
The manuscript was hidden in a lacquered chest beneath the floorboards of the old monastery library, a building half swallowed by vines, its ceiling collapsed, its prayer scrolls chewed to dust. Anya hadn't meant to find it. She'd been following the boy. He'd wandered off again just before dawn, barefoot and silent, trailing a thread of string from his fingers as if playing some private game. She trailed behind him, careful not to interrupt whatever trance had taken him this time. He led her not into the forest, but toward the forgotten wing of the monastery, one the villagers never spoke of, tucked behind the ruined prayer hall like a discarded memory. The door groaned when she pushed it open. The air inside was stale, brittle with mold and forgotten incense. Shelves leaned at broken angles. Scrolls had disintegrated into piles of powder. Rats had built their nests from holy texts. The boy stopped at the back wall. He knelt, pressed his ear to the floor, whispered, then stood and left without a word. Anya crouched where he had been and tapped along the wooden floor. Hollow. Carefully, she pried up a loose panel. Inside, a small chest wrapped in faded yellow cloth, sealed with wax and bound with thin rope stained black. She hesitated only a second before opening it. Inside was a single palm leaf manuscript, brittle, darkened with age, its surface etched with ancient Pali in tight, spiraling lines. Tied to it was a length of fraying white string. She took it. When she opened the manuscript, the air changed. The wind outside stopped. The trees stilled. The world seemed to lean in. The first words were a chant, a gata, but not one she recognized. The rhythm was off, too slow, too heavy. It was not meant to be sung in worship. It was meant to seal something away. The final line was incomplete. It ended mid-stroke, the final syllable trailing into a sharp ink blot as though the scribe had stopped suddenly. Anya stared at it for a long time. Then she heard it. A voice, not outside, inside the library, inside the manuscript. It was whispering the chant, not aloud, not in sound, but in her mind, sliding behind her thoughts, repeating again and again, just beneath the level of words. Her hands trembled as she flipped the manuscript over.
Tucked inside was a page torn from another source. A drawing. A man, shaved head, cross-legged, eyes sealed with wax, mouth open wide. From it, strings poured like blood. That evening, she brought the manuscript to the old man by the banyan tree, the one who had helped bind the monk long ago. His face went pale the moment he saw it. "This should have burned," he whispered. "We were told to destroy it." "Why didn't you?" "Because we were afraid." He explained. The chant was not to banish. It was not an exorcism in the way outsiders understood it. It was a binding, a contract. The monks had once used it to tether a spirit into a body, force it to remain still, to sleep, to rot in silence. When Luang Pi Tam invited the forest ghost into himself, the monks panicked. He had become both vessel and jailer. And the chant was the only thing that kept the prison sealed. "But someone never finished it," Anya said. The old man looked at her with hollow eyes. "The abbot. He slit his throat before he could. He knew if he spoke the last word, it would pass to him." "Pass what?" "The burden." That night, the manuscript sat on Anya's floor. She stared at it for hours, the chant now fully alive in her thoughts, like a heartbeat. Thud, thud, repeat. She tried to write the final syllable. Her hand cramped, her pen cracked, the ink refused to flow. Outside, the bell rang again, 3 times. Then silence. Then once more, a 4th ring. The villagers heard it too. Doors creaked open, lights flickered. A storm gathered above the hills, and then the child screamed. Anya ran. She found the boy crouched in the dirt outside the spirit house, digging again. But this time, he wasn't drawing eyes. He was drawing mouths. Rows of them, wide open, empty, screaming. "I heard it," he said calmly, "the word they never finished." Anya's voice trembled. "What was it?" He turned to her slowly, his pupils blown wide. "You." Anya staggered back. "What?" "You are the last syllable," he whispered. "He's not waiting for the chant to end. He's waiting for you to say it." Lightning split the sky, and in the temple, the glass coffin cracked. Just once, but enough. The rain came in sheets that night, thick, unrelenting, drowning the village in a constant roar that swallowed even the sound of breath. Thunder cracked like bones in the sky. The jungle, once quiet, now murmured restlessly beneath the deluge. But it was the silence inside Anya's room that terrified her most. She sat cross-legged on the floor, the manuscript laid before her like an altar. Candles flickered in a circle, casting long, twitching shadows across the walls. Her reflection in the mirror behind them had stopped moving minutes ago. Outside, the glass coffin waited, and tonight, she was going back. The decision wasn't rational. It came not from logic or even fear, but from a pull, a calling, like the final piece of a chant already half-spoken. She wrapped the manuscript in plastic, tied a red string around her wrist, and left just before midnight. The forest swallowed her. No flashlight, no camera, only instinct and dread guiding her steps. The rain stung her skin, warm and metallic. The jungle seemed to part for her, trees bowing ever so slightly, vines curling away. She didn't feel alone, She hadn't for days. When she reached Wat Tham Rung, lightning illuminated the ruins like a stage, each flash revealing details she hadn't seen before. The statues of monks outside the prayer hall were all facing inward now. A row of fresh footprints, bare and small, led up the broken steps. The main doors, once ajar, now stood wide open. She stepped inside. The hall smelled different, not of dust and rot, but of something alive, earthy, sweet, sickly. The candles she had not lit were burning, 7 of them, positioned in a circle around the glass coffin. The fog inside the coffin had thickened. It swirled slowly, like breath caught in limbo. Anya stepped forward, water dripping from her hair, her clothes clinging to her skin. Her feet moved without command. She was no longer a visitor. She was a participant. A final piece. The glass was cracked at the top right corner, barely visible, but it was there. The monk sat unchanged, yet everything about him felt different. His eyes were closed, but they fluttered now, subtly, like someone trapped in REM sleep. His lips, slightly parted, twitched at the corners. The fingers on his right hand had shifted. They now rested against the inside of the coffin, almost gently. Anya crouched beside the coffin. Her fingers brushed the wood frame. Warm. She leaned in, closer, closer, until her forehead rested against the glass. And then she saw it. Not with her eyes, but through them. The fog parted inside the coffin, not as vapor, but as memory. She saw monks chanting by firelight, circling the monk's body. Red strings wrapped around his wrists, his ankles, his neck. Wax poured into his mouth. Ash spread across his chest. And she saw the thing inside him. Not a demon, not a ghost. A voice, a hunger. It had no face, no form, only presence. It whispered into each monk's ear, promising blessings, healing, peace. One by one, they fell to their knees. They confessed into his mouth. They fed him their sins, and the sins stayed, trapped, rotting inside the body that never decayed, until the chant was broken, and the monk became something more. A reliquary, a tomb, a mirror. The fog thickened again, the vision faded, and then a sound, soft, wet, a crack. Anya recoiled. A long, splintering fracture now ran down the center of the glass. Inside, the monk's eyes were open. Not wide, not glaring, just open. Calm, patient, endless. She wanted to scream, but her voice caught in her throat. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out the manuscript and read. The chant spilled from her lips like something remembered from another life. Her voice shook, but the words came, one by one, until the final syllable. She stopped, because the monk smiled and mouthed it, "You." The candles extinguished all at once. The glass coffin exploded outward, and everything went dark. Anya awoke on the temple floor, soaked in mud and ash, alone. The coffin was gone. The monk was gone. Only the manuscript remained open to the final page. But now the last line had changed. It read, "The one who speaks becomes the one who holds." She touched her throat and felt a string, tight and thin, wrapped 3 times around her neck. She hadn't put it there. Morning came, but it carried no light. The rain had stopped, yet the clouds above the valley hung so low it felt as if the heavens themselves were pressing down, forcing the village to its knees. The mist clung to the rooftops, the air heavy with the smell of damp soil and something older, like incense gone sour. Anya awoke on the floor of the guest house, her clothes stiff with dried mud, the string still coiled around her neck. She couldn't remember how she'd returned. Her fingernails were packed with black grit. Her voice, when she tried to speak, came out hoarse and unfamiliar. The old woman found her just before noon. "You went there again," she said. It wasn't a question. Anya nodded weakly. The woman's eyes filled with fear. "You brought something back." She handed Anya a small clay bowl filled with lime water and white ash. "Wash your hands in this. Don't let the earth dry on you. The dead speak through what clings." When Anya dipped her hands in, the water fizzed like acid. The black mud peeled away, but beneath it, faint red lines had appeared, curling around her wrists in the shape of binding threads. That night, the villagers gathered in silence by the riverbank. Word had spread that the novice monk who once tended the temple had returned from the city. He was older now, with a hollow stare and skin the color of wax. His name was Fra Niran. He spoke quietly, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. "I heard the chanting again," he said. "It reached me even in Chiang Mai, in my sleep. I came back because I know what it means." The villagers listened, frozen, afraid to breathe. Anya stepped forward. "Tell me." He hesitated, then whispered, "The ritual wasn't meant to trap a spirit. It was meant to contain our confessions." The crowd stirred uneasily. When the forest ghost came, the monks were terrified. They believed if they shared their sins aloud, the spirit would take pity and leave. So they confessed, not to God, not to Buddha, but to Luang Pi Tham, into his open mouth. He paused, eyes distant. "We thought it worked. The deaths stopped, the forest quieted. But the monk began to change. His body swelled with the weight of what we gave him. Every whisper, every guilt, every secret, it all sank into him." Anya felt her stomach twist. "And when he died?" "He didn't die," Niran said softly. "He rotted from within. Not flesh, faith. Every sin we gave him began to speak back." He reached into his satchel and pulled out an old oil lamp. Its glass was blackened, its wick stiff. He set it down and struck a match. The flame flared, the air shifted. The smell hit first, sweet, nauseating, rancid. A voice followed, low, wet, whispering from the lamp itself. Dozens of voices layered on top of one another, chanting out of rhythm. Niran's hands shook. "These are the voices of the bound," he said, "the ones who confessed. They never left. When the monk's bindings broke, so did ours." The light in the lamp sputtered, then steadied. And from the shadows behind Anya, another voice answered. A single whisper, so soft it might have been her imagination. "You confessed too." She turned sharply. Nothing, only fog. But the old woman crossed herself, murmuring prayers. "He speaks again," she said. "The rot remembers." That night, Anya couldn't bear to sleep inside. She walked to the edge of the rice fields, the world muted by mist. The frogs had stopped croaking. Even the wind had abandoned the valley. Her reflection stared back at her in a puddle. The eyes were hers. The mouth was not. It smiled. Then it whispered, her own voice, warped and decayed. You can't silence what was never buried. She stumbled backward. Her chest ached. The air felt thick, heavy. She pressed her hands against her ears, but the whisper continued from within. Behind her, the bell at Wat Tham Rung tolled once. The ground trembled, and in the distance, over the jungle canopy, a plume of smoke began to rise, dark and slow, as if the forest itself had begun to exhale. By dawn, the smell of rot had spread to every house in Bon Pom Frau. The people sealed their doors with salt and lime. They hung talismans of bone and string, but it didn't matter. The chanting had started again, only this time it wasn't coming from the temple. It was coming from every mouth that had ever confessed. The headman collapsed in prayer, his tongue swelling until he could no longer speak. The old woman began to cough petals. The river turned the color of rust, and Anya, watching it all unfold, realized the chant was not a prayer. It was a contagion, and she was now its vessel.
The manuscript was gone. Anya woke to the smell of scorched paper and wet earth. Her satchel sat open beside her bed, the cloth singed, the pages inside reduced to ash and a faint spiral of smoke. And yet, the chant, once etched on palm leaves, was still etched in her mind. Every syllable, every breath. The words pulsed beneath her skin, humming like a second heartbeat. She wasn't reciting it aloud, but it didn't matter anymore. The monk had never needed lips to speak. Outside, the village was unraveling. The boy had stopped drawing eyes. Now he carved them into trees, into doors, into his own arms. Not crying, not flinching, just focused, as if fulfilling instructions whispered by something no one else could hear. The river no longer flowed. It sat still, thick as oil. Frogs floated belly up in its shallows. The air reeked of copper. And the villagers no longer prayed. They chanted, softly, wrongly, backwards, as if pulled into a rhythm that had no origin, no leader, no end. The shaman came to Anya just before dusk, a man she hadn't seen before. He wore no robes, only a woven sash and eyes that hadn't slept in days. His voice was barely audible over the hum that now vibrated through the very ground. You're carrying the final verse. It's bleeding out of you. Anya shook her head. I didn't finish it. I stopped. The shaman crouched, picked up a clump of ash from her satchel and let it fall through his fingers. You didn't need to speak the end. You just needed to know it. He took a deep breath, then said what no one else dared. We must finish the chant. Her stomach twisted. Finish it? Why? That's what caused this. No, he said. What caused this was fear. The abbot stopped halfway. He cut his throat rather than carry the burden. His silence became a doorway, left open. Rot doesn't leave on its own. It has to be sealed, burned, or spoken through to the end. He unwrapped a bundle of cloth. Inside was a bone flute, carved with ancient symbols and wrapped in black thread. This was used in the first ritual.
It was never meant to be blown, only held, to carry the sound forward. Anya looked at it. What happens if we finish it? We bind it again, but this time, he said, pausing, we need a vessel strong enough to carry all the voices. Her throat clenched. You mean me? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. That night, the bell at Wat Tham Rung rang 7 times. The villagers didn't react. They knelt in rows, eyes closed, mouths moving in perfect unison, not praying, echoing, repeating words never meant for the living. Anya stood at the edge of the jungle with the shaman and the boy. The path ahead was lit by oil lamps that flickered without flame, as if the light had learned to burn without permission. The temple loomed ahead, reborn in the mist. The cracks in its walls had healed. The broken roof was whole again. But the wood was wrong. Too dark, too smooth, too new. Inside, the glass coffin stood empty. In its place was a mat, simple, straw, waiting. The shaman handed Anya the flute. The boy placed 7 jasmine petals around the mat. Anya sat cross-legged, the same way the monk once had. She closed her eyes and began. The chant poured from her, not spoken, but breathed. Each syllable tasted like smoke, ash, forgotten prayers. The words were not hers. They belonged to every person who had ever whispered a secret into the dark. Her body began to tremble, her teeth chattered, her spine arched, but she didn't stop. She reached the final verse, the one no one had ever spoken. The room pulsed with heat, the air filled with shadows. The shaman pressed his forehead to the floor. The boy stared unblinking. Anya opened her mouth and finished the chant. The sound was not human. It was the sound of release, of something exhaling for the first time in centuries. The walls shook, the lamps blew out, and from her throat something emerged, not a spirit, not a scream, but a chorus, a voice made of many, sins layered on sins, regrets, secrets, curses, all spoken at once. And then, silence, complete, heavy, holy. Anya collapsed. The temple cracked again, this time inward, as if breathing out. The glass coffin reappeared, empty, but sealed, this time sealed with her reflection, staring back from inside. Eyes closed, hands folded, mouth shut. The forest was quiet again, too quiet. The morning after the ritual, Ban Phan Prao stirred like a village that had slept through a storm and awoken to find its roof gone. The river moved once more, though sluggishly. The frogs returned, croaking cautiously. Children played without drawing eyes into the dirt. But no one smiled, because something was still wrong. Anya was gone. Not dead, not missing, just absent. Her room at the guest house sat untouched, her clothes neatly folded, the manuscript gone, the bone flute gone, even the string that once circled her neck had vanished, as if it had never existed. And still, no one dared speak her name. The villagers lit incense, but only during the day. They offered food, but never fruit, only rice, plain and cold. And at night, they listened for footsteps, soft, bare, deliberate. The first to hear them was the headman's wife. She was drawing water from the well just after sundown when she felt the air shift. No breeze, just a sudden stillness, like the forest had stopped breathing. Then, step, step, step. She turned, heart rattling against her ribs, and there, moving through the edge of the rice field, was a figure in saffron robes. Not floating, not gliding, walking, slow, calm, in meditation. She couldn't see the face, but she saw the hands, folded together at the stomach, fingertips blackened, as if dipped in ink or ash. By morning, more villagers had seen it. A monk, a woman, something in between, silent, passing, leaving no footprints. Each time the figure appeared just after dusk, always following the same path, along the field, past the banyan tree, to the gates of Wat Tham Rung. The same path Luang Pi Tom had once walked decades ago. But now, it was Anya. The boy was the first to say it aloud. It's her. She walks now, because he no longer can. The villagers didn't argue. They began to leave offerings along the path, not out of worship, but out of fear, because those who had seen her and ignored her woke the next day with strange marks on their bodies. Small, faint, like fingerprints burned gently into their skin, always at the throat, always in the shape of a closed mouth. The shaman, gaunt and sleepless, gathered the elders beneath the banyan tree. They sat in silence, listening to the distant sound of bells, though none had rung since the temple collapsed. "She is not a spirit," he said. "She is a vessel, a chant with legs." "She finished it. Didn't that seal him?" someone whispered. "She sealed him, but the voices he carried now live in her." "Then why is she walking?" The shaman looked toward the jungle, his face pale. "Because sin doesn't vanish when bound. It waits, and it walks to remember what must not be forgotten." That night, the walking continued. She passed through the village once more, her shadow long and unnatural, her head bowed, her steps perfectly timed as if moving to the rhythm of a hidden drum. And for the first time, someone followed. A young man, curious and bold, stepped into her path. He raised a camera, clicked once. The next morning he was found kneeling in the rice field, hands together, mouth sewn shut with thread, eyes missing. But on the photo he took, before the lens cracked, there was no figure, only footprints. 6 of them, walking in a circle. The villagers began sleeping in shifts, watching the path, waiting, listening, until, slowly, the sightings grew fewer, the footsteps quieter, as if the chant was growing tired, or finished, or looking for the next mouth to speak through. And yet, still, every year, on the same night, when the moon hung low and red in the sky, the bell at Wat Tham Rung rang only once, and the villagers all lit incense at the same moment, not to worship, but to remember that something had walked here, and might walk again. The jungle no longer slept. It exhaled, slowly, deliberately, with the patience of something ancient that had waited too long beneath the soil. The air had changed again. The villagers didn't speak of it, not directly, but they felt it in the way their crops withered early, in the way fireflies stopped coming to the riverbanks, in the way their dreams filled with the sound of breathing that wasn't their own. Anya's path was no longer seen, but still followed, a dirt trail through damp grass where nothing grew. The footprints had faded, the sightings stopped, but the fear remained, coiled tight beneath every floorboard, folded into every prayer. Then one night, a new scent drifted into the village. Not rot, not ash, something older. Burnt wax, blood smoke, wet stone. And then came the coughing. It started with the old woman at the guest house, Anya's host. She choked in the middle of a sentence and spat something dark into her hand. It wasn't blood, it was dirt. The shaman was called. He came quietly, carrying a string of black beads and a bowl of river water. He asked to see her room, the one Anya had stayed in. When he entered, he fell to his knees, because the walls were breathing. He placed his palm to the bamboo, and it rose and fell like a sleeping chest, warm, moist, living. He didn't speak. He only left a thread of hair and wax at the threshold and sealed the door with salt. It started again, he told the villagers, but they already knew. Because at that same moment, deep in the jungle, something cracked. A sound like wood splitting, but older, wetter, like bones that had never truly been buried, finally tearing free. And the forest began to move. Not just sway, not just rustle, move. Trees leaned unnaturally, roots surfaced from the soil, coiling like veins. Ferns grew too quickly. The old stone path leading to Wat Tham Rung began to vanish beneath moss that glowed faintly in the dark. And then someone found the cave. It was a girl, barely 16, gathering wild ginger when she stumbled through a curtain of vines and into a space that shouldn't have existed. The cave was low and round, its walls slick with moisture, its air colder than the wind outside. At the center lay a shallow pit filled with bones, none of them burned, none of them arranged. They had been tossed, sacrificed, forgotten. And beside them, half buried, lay another coffin, not glass, not wood, stone, cracked, empty. When the girl returned to the village, her hair had turned completely white. She could no longer speak, only draw. And every drawing showed the same thing: a monk and another body, not sitting, not praying, but standing, watching, waiting. The shaman understood. The coffin they had known was never his. It had belonged to the abbot, the one who tried to stop the ritual, the one who slit his throat before finishing the chant. Luang Pi Tam had never been sealed. He had been left behind, free, patient, and hollow, waiting for someone else to speak the words for him. And Anya had done exactly that. Not bound him, replaced him. The boy, now older, now silent, began sleeping beside the temple ruins. He drew symbols into the dirt each morning, never spoke, but the villagers noticed something strange. Wherever he sat, the ground did not breathe. The shaman placed his hand on his back one night and whispered, "You remember, don't you?" The boy nodded once. "She didn't walk away, she walked inward," he said finally. That night, the jungle pressed even closer to the village. Branches scraped at rooftops, leaves slithered beneath doors, and from the forest came the sound of chanting. Not loud, not clear, but suffocating, like it was happening beneath the skin of the earth itself. The villagers didn't sleep. They watched the trees, and the trees watched back. The jungle had stopped pretending. It no longer whispered, it spoke. In the rustle of leaves that mimicked the rhythm of chants, in the groaning of branches bending toward the village, not from wind, but will. In the breath that rose from the soil, damp and sour, curling beneath doors and into lungs. And always, beneath it all, the pulse of something ancient, awakening. The villagers no longer left their homes. They sealed their windows with white cloth soaked in salt water, braided protective cords from hair and twine, and whispered the names of the old gods they had long forgotten. But the rope around their prayers was fraying, because the monk was walking again, and he was no longer alone. Anya had not vanished into silence. She had become the silence between syllables, the pause in the chant where air turns to breath and breath turns to speech. And now she was calling. The boy was the first to hear her. He sat outside the ruins, drawing concentric circles into the dirt, eyes closed, lips moving in rhythm with a voice only he could hear. When he stopped, he looked up at the shaman and spoke clearly for the first time in weeks. "She says we must finish what the abbot refused." The shaman knelt. "What does she want?" "She doesn't want. She remembers." He held out a length of rope, old, frayed, blackened at the tips. "She says we must tie the tongue." The villagers gasped. It was an ancient rite, one none of them had performed in living memory. A punishment, a sealing, a sacrifice. To tie the tongue was to silence a spirit, not through chant, not through prayer, but through binding. To tie the tongue was to close the mouth that wouldn't stop speaking. The shaman gathered what few elders remained. They moved in silence, preparing the ritual as if remembering a funeral for someone still alive. They needed a rope spun from 7 different graves, wax from candles lit during childbirth, a stone basin filled with river water drawn beneath the red moon, and the final chant spoken in reverse. As night fell, the forest opened, not with a path, but with space. Trees shifted aside, roots flattened, and there, at the center, where no clearing had ever been, stood a single figure, Anya, or something that wore her shape. She did not blink, she did not breathe, she watched. The rope floated in the boy's hands, the wax melted without flame, the basin trembled, its surface rippling with the sound of distant bells. The shaman approached her slowly, the chanting beginning behind him, faltering, unsure, but growing stronger with each syllable. He raised the rope, stepped closer, but her mouth opened, and what came out was not words. It was air, thick, black, full of names, not screams, confessions. The shaman staggered back, choking on memory that wasn't his. He dropped the rope, fell to his knees. The villagers wailed, the basin shattered, the earth cracked beneath their feet. And the boy picked up the rope, walked to her, looked into her endless eyes, and whispered, "You've held enough." Then he tied it, 1 knot, 2, 3, around her tongue. Not physically, not visibly, but spiritually. The chant broke, The forest groaned, and Anya exhaled. Not smoke, light, faint, fading. Her body trembled, then stilled. Her eyes closed, and she collapsed into the soil, softly, as if returning home. The rope turned to dust, the wax cooled, and the jungle sighed. Not in anger, not in hunger, but in relief. The breath of something that had been held too long, finally let go.
It did not rain the next morning. For the first time in weeks, the sky broke open with sunlight, pale and thin, like a memory of warmth rather than the thing itself. Birds returned to the trees. The river began to flow clear again. The dogs stopped howling, and the forest was quiet. Not the heavy, watchful silence of something hiding, but true stillness, like a breath held and finally released. They buried Anya at the foot of the banyan tree. The villagers gathered, dressed in white, their faces drawn with something heavier than grief. It wasn't mourning, not exactly. It was reverence. She had not been one of them, but she had carried something none of them dared to touch. They didn't burn her body. They didn't wrap her in cloth. They simply placed her in the earth, bare, clean, whole, beneath the roots of the tree that had watched over them for generations. And as the soil was packed gently over her chest, the boy stepped forward and laid a single object atop the mound, a carving, a mouth, closed, silent. The chant had ended, but its echo lingered. That night, the villagers lit candles on their windowsills, not to ward off spirits, but to guide the living back to sleep. The shaman walked the edge of the jungle with a bowl of lime and ash, whispering prayers not to bind, but to bless. And the boy returned to the temple. What remained of Wat Tham Rung was little more than a skeleton now. Stone outlines, fallen beams, moss growing over what had once been sacred. But the glass coffin had returned, no longer cracked, no longer fogged, empty. He sat before it and opened Anya's journal, left behind, water-stained and torn, but still legible in places. She had written it all, every dream, every word, every sound. The last page was written in a trembling hand, as if the ink had fought to leave her. I was never meant to speak it, only to carry it, only to hold it long enough for someone else to finish the breath I could not. But the silence that followed is mine. He closed the book, and for the first time in what felt like years, he smiled. That evening, the villagers heard a new sound, faint but clear. Not chanting, not bells. Laughter, soft, honest, human. But peace, like rot, never arrives without leaving a stain. In the days that followed, small signs remained. The bamboo wall of Anya's room grew warm when touched. The wind sometimes carried the scent of jasmine and burnt wax. And in the mirror above the guest house wash basin, her face appeared, not always, not fully, but just enough to remind them that she was still watching, still holding, but not suffering. One morning, a traveler passed through the village, a man with a camera, curious about rumors of haunted temples and monks who never died. The villagers welcomed him kindly, offered food, shared laughter.
But when he asked about Wat Tham Rung, they fell silent. The headman smiled and said only, "We've buried our ghosts. Let them rest." Still, that night, the traveler wandered out of curiosity, found the overgrown path, climbed the crumbling steps. He didn't see a temple. He saw a tree, tall, towering, alive. At its roots, a small wooden marker. No name, just a carving of lips, closed, silent. And for a moment, he swore he heard it. Not a voice, not a word, but a sound, faint as breath. A whisper not meant to scare, but to warn. He turned and left, and he never returned. Years passed, seasons shifted, names changed. The village was paved, the temple was erased. Ban Pan Prao became a speck on tourism maps, rebranded as a retreat destination for urban monks, a peaceful escape nestled on the edge of the northern forest. The brochures spoke of eco-temples and curated silence. They did not speak of what once walked in that silence. But the land remembered. It always does. One summer, a new monastery was built in Bangkok. Sleek, white, modern, polished marble halls, LED candles, air conditioning, a meditation app tied to donations. The abbot was young and progressive. He wanted relics, something old to ground the new, something with gravity, with story. So he accepted a gift, a donation, an anonymous crate shipped from the north, bearing no name, only a handwritten tag to remember what must not be forgotten. Inside, a glass coffin, perfectly preserved, no cracks, no dust, empty. The monks placed it in the central hall, flanked by candles that never melted. Tourists came, knelt, took photos. Some said they felt a sense of calm standing near it. Others said they left the hall unable to speak for hours. A few swore they heard breathing, but no one complained. The monks said it was a relic, an echo of a sainted monk who had once attained deep meditation and never awoke. They didn't know his name, but they called him the Still One. The coffin became popular on social media. A hashtag trended briefly, #GlassMonk. It looked beautiful in photos, the symmetry, the light, the reflection. But one morning, a child wandered into the temple early, before the gates opened. He was quiet, strange, always drawing. The custodian found him sitting cross-legged before the coffin, eyes closed, whispering. When asked what he was saying, the boy replied, "I'm listening." To what? He smiled, a soft, closed-lipped smile. To the mouths inside. And when the custodian looked, truly looked, he saw breath on the glass, faint, lingering, a fog pressed from within. It was gone by the time others arrived. But that night, the cameras in the temple glitched. Every hour, on the hour, they captured a single frame, the coffin, empty, then not. A shadow, barely formed, curled within it like smoke taking shape. At 3:07 a.m., the final frame appeared. A face. Not smiling, not scowling, just watching. The temple deleted the footage. The abbot said it was a digital error, static, reflections. But he began to light incense twice as often. And from then on, no one ever cleaned the glass again, because each morning a new breath mark appeared, delicate, circular, human, sometimes at the center, sometimes near the top, sometimes on the outside. Visitors still come. They kneel, they bow, they whisper. They call it peaceful, holy, a place of stillness. But beneath the marble floor, in the quiet hum of conditioned air, something old still listens. Something that once held 1,000 voices now waits in silence. Not hungry, not cruel, just awake. And behind the glass, the shape of a mouth slowly forming in the mist, as if ready to speak again, only waiting for someone to listen.